Welcome to the next video in this series on co-parenting after divorce. I'm John Peters, and we're going to get to a lot of practical advice about how to co-parent effectively after separation and cope with divorce and help your children cope with divorce. But I want to talk a little more in this video about your brain and the importance of considering how your brain can work for you or against you with all the things that you're trying to do now and will be doing with your kid's other parent and with your kid for years to come. So stay tuned. Welcome to Wellness with John. I'm John Peters, and these are resources to help you thrive. Hopefully, you have watched the preceding videos in this series. If you haven't, I'm going to put a link up here to the first one. Go back there now, start there, and then come forward through the sequence to this video, because these early videos especially make more sense if you watch them in order. The later videos are going to jump around to different topics, and you can kind of pick and choose what you want to watch with those as you deem appropriate, right? But why am I talking to you about this? Because I'm a therapist who's been working with thousands of parents in a variety of roles for many years. And so I wanted to share some of the things that I've learned over the last 27 years working with thousands of parents who are going through separation or who have separated, and some things that are going to help you supercharge your parenting so that you not only cope with your divorce well yourself, but you deal with the other parent as well as you can, and that you parent your kid as best you can as well, right? I'm a parent, I'm a divorced parent. I know it's hard, right? So in this video, I want to talk a little more about what I introduced in the last video, which is talking about your brain. And the reason that I'm emphasizing this early on and so strongly is that if we ignore our brain, then it's a setup for an unsuccessful attempt at lots of very complicated and consequential things that we need to do as separated parents. And I'm not going to get too sciencey, and I'm not going to belabor this point beyond where I think we need to, but the reason that I'm talking about this, and this will become clear in some future videos where I talk about some of the specific brain changes and effects that it has on your brain, and how to correct for them so that you can co-parent and parent effectively. But we need to understand fundamentally that we have to pay attention to our brain. And there are a couple of reasons for this. First, if we ignore how our brain is wired and how it can work against us, then we are not steering towards success. And you're going to be more reactive and random and ineffective in your actions. And once you understand some things that I'm going to share about the brain, it's going to work for you rather than against you, okay? The other thing is, in general, and this will be a point that I come back around to in future videos as well, you and I as individuals have to focus on what we can control. I'm in control of myself more than anyone else, even those close to me. And you're in control of yourself more than you're in control of your child's other parent, even though you might like to be more in control of that person. But you need to focus on some things that you can control. I know a lot of parents get mired in hostility and anger and hurt through the divorce process, and you're not unusual if you're feeling anger, if you're feeling hurt. But what that tends to do is it tends to cause us to do what we in psychology call externalize. So if I'm hurt in my divorce and I externalize it, I blame it on my daughter's mom, right? It's her fault, and she's the jerk. And if anything's going to improve, it's because she makes a change, right? That's externalization. And when we do that, we're putting the control over into some basket that's outside of our individual control. And that leads to a sense of victimization and a sense of powerlessness. Now, I know when I say this to parents, you may be thinking this. A lot of parents come back to me and say, yeah, John, but my ex really is evil, stupid, and crazy, and let me tell you about it. And I'm going to actually focus on that issue in a later video. But it's externalization based on what you're experiencing and not having a sense of control. So part of my aim in educating you through this sequence of videos on this topic is to show you ways that you actually can be effective, ways that you can be in control of yourself to influence your situation, including improving your co-parenting relationship with your child's other parent, even if you're not in control of them, and parenting effectively. Even though you're not 100% in control of your kid, you have a lot of influence, especially if your kid is younger. So I'm not trying to argue against your sense that there are some things out of your control that are affecting you. But what I am trying to do is teach you how to be more in control of yourself in ways that allow you to be more effective in the ways that you need to be as a co-parent and as a parent, okay? And in order to do that, we really need to talk about your brain. Your brain is a physical organ, and it's not this ambiguous energy ball out there like on a science fiction show like Star Trek. It's an actual physical organ, and it has a lot of influence on the quality of how you perform, because your brain is how you perceive things and how you formulate your reactions to things, right? So it's why, why do I not want to get on a flight to go travel somewhere on an airplane and have my pilot be drunk? Because alcohol will affect the pilot's brain, and the pilot won't perform the way they need to perform to safely fly the airplane, right? Or just recently in my own life, I had a night where there was a sick family member who doesn't live with me that I had to be on the phone with when I was trying to sleep, right? So I'm awake on the phone instead of sleeping. And then I ended up having to drive and get them and take them to the hospital. So I spent all night in the emergency room with this family member. And not surprisingly, the next day, not only was I physically tired, but I was mentally not clear. And I also noticed that I was more irritable than normal, right? Why was that true? Because my brain was affected from lack of sleep, and I was more irritable and less focused, right? It's a physical organ, and it's affected by circumstances. So our brain state changes from moment to moment. And there's also a brain fitness effect that I'll get to in a later video, because not only does our brain change into different states from moment to moment, but our brain can be more or less fit. Just like I could be more or less fit if I go sign myself up to compete in a triathlon, right? If I don't train, I'm not fit, so I don't perform well, right? So fitness is also an issue with performance, and there is such a thing as brain fitness, which I am going to explain in future videos how you can improve your brain fitness. But we need to understand the brain because, as I mentioned in the previous video, our brains are wired so that when stress goes up, certain brain changes occur. And those brain changes are an advantage if we're fighting off a bear, but they are a disadvantage if we are dealing with the type of stress that you're dealing with during and after your separation. And why is that true? Because we didn't deal with these more abstract interpersonal kinds of stressors for hundreds of millions of years. They just didn't exist because social interrelatedness wasn't complex enough for that to even be a thing, right? All day, every day, it was just, how can I not get eaten by that tiger over there, right? And so our brain developed in the context of facing physical threat, and was not facing these abstract interpersonal threats until very, very recently. But there's only one system. There's only one stress system. And our brain is part of that stress system, and it's pretty much designed to fight off physical threats, not non-physical threats. So these brain changes happen, and just like me being more irritable after a day of bad sleep, the reality is if I'm up to code red on my stress scale, I'm more likely to think negative thoughts. I'm more likely to get stuck in a negative thought, which we call rumination. And I'm more likely to perceive things as more negative than normal, right? Like, that character Eeyore from 100 Acre Wood with Winnie the Pooh. And the joke about the character, the subtext of that was that Eeyore was always spinning everything into some doom dire kind of view of the situation, right? And if we tried to explain why is Eeyore doing that, we might explain something psychologically, like Eeyore somehow got traumatized early in life. But the reality is Eeyore's brain is mediating the experience to cause that reaction, right? Now, that's a character, a fictional character, but we're all wired that way. If you've ever had a friend or family member who's been depressed, you can see that their depression colors their experience, right? Or if not even thinking about your divorce, but if you think about a friend or family member in the past who's gone through a breakup and they won't shut up talking about the breakup for weeks or months, why is that? The brain is fixated on this thing in a certain way, and there's this glue function in the brain that won't let them unhook, right? It's not because it's a good idea to think about your breakup all day, every day for 6 months. It's just, there's no reason that we have to do that, but our brain does it, right? And why is that? It's a leftover artifact from the fact that if a tiger is chasing us, our brain does not want to lose sight of the tiger. So our brain locks on the danger target and doesn't let go until we are out of danger, which means when our stress level has gone down, right? So when stress level's high, we lock on target, we ruminate, we fixate, and the glue won't let us unhook until the stress level goes down, right? So why did your friend keep talking about the breakup all day, every day? Because they were stressed out about it, right? If you lower stress, you get this fluid ability to move your attention around more freely, and the glue weakens, basically. So I'm going to give some specific tips in future videos about the specific brain changes and the strategies to correct for them. But this video is just to emphasize you must consider the fact that you are an embodied human being with a brain. Your brain works for you much of the time. Your brain also works against you some of the time, right? And I want you to perform as well as you can as a co-parent, and I don't want your brain to be working against you. So I need you to consider this. It also is something that leads people into starting to get traction on feeling like, you know what, there are things I can control to influence the quality of my co-parenting relationship. There are things I can control to influence the quality of my parenting and to try to shelter my child from the negative aspects of the divorce and to support them in their development and their nurturance and to have a good relationship with my kid, right? If you don't consider the fact that you have a brain and it's working for and against you variously, then you're not as well equipped as I want you to be in proceeding down your path, right? So that's why I'm emphasizing this. So on the practical level, let's get practical. If we want our brain to work for us more of the time and to not work against us, then the path forward is to generally do things that counteract stress, because as I've mentioned already a couple of times, when stress is high, it doesn't matter what the trigger is. It doesn't matter what the substance, what the issue is. If stress is high, your brain is going to work against you in lots of ways. And so some of the advice that I'm going to give you has to do with things that are likely to help you lower your stress. So stay tuned with this sequence of videos in this topic, because some of them are going to be focused on what can you do to take care of yourself, to cope well, and to lower your stress so you're just spending more time not up at code red. Because when you're up at code red, you don't perform well. I don't perform well, right? So I'm going to give you some fundamental advice about some things that are reliable strategies to generally lower your stress and to avoid the things that generally will add to your stress, so that more of the time you're flying at code green, yellow, and orange and not getting up to code red as much of a percentage of the time, right? That's a general approach to lowering stress for the purpose of keeping stress from derailing your functioning and making you unduly miserable, right? But I also want to talk about some specific things. So in some of the videos, we're going to drill down and talk about what are some very specific strategies to deal with some very common, specific ways that these brain changes show up and work against you. So, for example, and I'll talk about this in more detail later, one of the things that happens with our brain is that we tend to see the negative. When we're more stressed, we're focused on the negative, the danger, and we tend to actually not even see that the positive becomes invisible, right? Why is that? Because again, our brains were not wired to make us stop and smell the roses while we're being chased by a tiger, right? So our brain is naturally wired to not see the positive. But this works against you as a co-parent, because if you look over in the direction of your child's other parent, when you're more stressed out, you're going to see more negative, and you're actually not even going to see the positive even when it exists, right? That means that you're going to perceive that person as being even more of a jerk than they actually are. And they're going to perceive you as being more of a jerk than you actually are. I don't know if you've had this experience yet, but you might have tried to be super civil and collaborative and do the right thing, and your ex still reacted as though you were a jerk, right? Why is this? Because the brain makes us see jerk stuff when we're stressed out more than we see the rosy stuff, right? Again, we're not wired to stop and smell the roses when we're being chased by a tiger, right? So I'm going to tell you about some specific ways to not only correct for that in yourself, but to try to dial out some of that interference as it exists in your relationship with your child's other parent, right? Of course, I am also going to talk about a wide variety of practical things, such as how do you talk to your kid about separation? How do you help your kid with their grief process in terms of their adjustments to your situation as it changes, and how to deal with the legal system and things like that. But stay tuned. But in this video, I just really wanted to emphasize and to try to get you to understand, we have to consider how your brain functions in order for you to get the best possible outcomes, because you need to take care of yourself, and that includes considering how your brain works for and against you, right? So my prescription for that, again, is do things that are generally going to lower your stress and get you good support. Avoid things that are going to work against you. And I'm going to have some videos specifically on that topic that are coming up here shortly because this is so important. A stressed out brain is going to work against you, and you don't need that, right? Now, I know, again, some parents come back to me and say, yeah, but I'm under too much stress. I can't even imagine it being lower because it's overwhelming. And I explained that in the video of why a divorce is so stressful. It's true. You probably are experiencing the most stressful series of events in your entire life. And so, yes, you're going to be stressed out, but that's part of the point. You don't have a lot of margin. You don't have a lot of wiggle room like you might with other situations that are less stressful. And so we need to do what we can to mitigate the negative influence of stress, because you really do need to co-parent as best you can, and you need to parent as best you can. And we need to try to take care of your stress as much as we can here, so that is the outcome, right? So that's the purpose of this video. So stay tuned in this sequence, and I'm going to get into more detail as we progress through the sequence.